phenomenal, fun, exciting, all that good stuff. And today we're going to talk about humility. So, I want to tell you a little bit about what I think humility is, because I think this is the most important thing that a Christian needs to learn. Because unless you realize that you are not the greatest thing in the world, you won't turn to God. If I think that every idea I have is the best idea that has ever been had, then I don't need God. If I think that I can fix every problem I've ever had by myself, then I don't need God. The first thing I need to realize is that I'm not perfect. I'm not as smart as I think I am. I'm not as strong or big as I think I am. And God is way, 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 way bigger than me. And if I've learned one thing about God, it's that if I start screwing up this humility thing, if I start thinking I'm better than I am, if I start getting my world out of whack because I start doing things God should be doing, then God will very kindly fix it for me. He'll teach me humility. And humility comes from the same word, humiliate. And so sometimes if I get a little too cocky, a little too arrogant, God has to fix that, teach me humility, and sometimes that means I get humiliated. So the way I see it, I've got two options. I can either learn to be humble on my own, or I'm probably going to get embarrassed. A couple years ago, I was in West Virginia. I was down there to go whitewater rafting with some friends, and me and a buddy had gone down early because I liked hiking and stuff like that, and so we were down there by ourselves, and there was this hiking trail called Apple Pie in the Sky, and I really wanted to climb it because I had to know if there was apple pie at the end of it, but my friend thought it was too difficult, and he said, "No, Aaron, you got to climb some stuff," and I don't think that we're prepared to do it. So we went back to the cabin, and I was like, "Oh, that was kind of a bummer." And as I was sitting in the cabin, dreaming about apple pie in the sky, I started to realize, I don't go to West Virginia frequently. If I'm ever going to do this, this is probably the only chance I'm going to have to do this. And then for the rest of my life, I will be wondering if there's apple pie in the sky. And so I decided about 7 o'clock at night, you know what, bud? You read your book. I am going to go climb this hiking trail. And so I climb, and there's some stuff you got to climb. And I get to the top, and there's this gorgeous view. There is no apple pie anywhere, but there's this gorgeous view. And I'm looking out, and it's real, just beautiful. And you can see the sunset over these hills, and I'm sitting on top of this rock, and all of a sudden I realize, how gorgeous this is. And also that the sun is setting, and that I'm about 2 miles away from my cabin in a state that I've never been in before. And then when the sun sets, I don't know if you're aware of this, sometimes it gets dark. And so as I'm watching the sunset this way, and it's light out here, I turn around back the way I was supposed to be going next, and it's already dark. And me, because I'm a little too arrogant and think that I have all the answers, I failed to bring a device with me that emits light. You might call this a flashlight. I realize I'm in some trouble. I'm going to have to go off on my own. And that's when I really start to be like, yep, apple pie in the sky on top of a rock formation, in the dark, no flashlight. I am man. I start going back there, start headed back, and I'm just thinking the whole time about what a wuss my buddy is, because it wasn't that hard, and I'm thinking of all these good jokes and make fun of him with, and tell him he's a little girl, and why doesn't he put his skirt back on and all this stuff, and I start to get real cocky because here I am, this trail that he said would be so difficult, and I am traversing it in the dark. At this point, I am the opposite of humble. I think that I am Bear Grylls, man versus wild at this point. I am ready to take on anything, and I'm hiking, and all of a sudden I see a little movement, and I kid you not, from here to about Jake's base, there is a bear. And I always kind of thought, if I saw a bear, I would know what to do. My body would just naturally do what it was supposed to do. And so I see bear. The first thing I see is the two eyes, and I'm like, what kind of creature? The bear looks at me, and my body knew exactly what to do. And I just peed my pants. 22 years old, strongest man alive. I am man. I can take on anything. Hiking trail in the dark, and all of a sudden, bear, freeze. Oh. I spent all night last night trying to rig some sort of radio control device that would like make a water packet explode in my pocket so I could it didn't work, obviously. But I freak out, and the bear kind of looks at me, and the bear kind of runs away. And that's when I realized it was a baby bear running away from me. It was this baby bear that made me pee myself. And a baby bear, if you don't know anything about baby bears, is they have claws, and they're kind of strong. I mean, they're probably not going to eat me. Most importantly, baby bears have mama bears, but this, I never saw mama bear. I just saw baby bear. Baby bears like their porridge too cold. Baby bears eat nuts and berries, and they kind of look cuddly. A baby bear is really, if you've ever been to the zoo, they're so cute, these little precious baby bears. And if you see one in the forest, you'll wet your pants. And that's when I kind of started to learn, like, every time in my life that I've gotten cocky, God has humiliated me, which is to say that every time I've thought that I was bigger or better or more powerful than I was, God has taught me a very pertinent lesson in humility. A long time ago, I don't know if any of you are like astronomy people who like to look at stars and stuff like that, but a long, long, long time ago, people thought that the earth was the center of the universe, that the earth stood still and everything else rotated around the earth. The sun, the stars, the moon, everything else rotated around the earth. And then there were these smart people smarter than me anyway, because I still thought that until I started writing this talk and did some research. And there were these people that found out that that's not what happened. And the reason that they decided to figure out if that was really how the world worked was because they would do these mathematical equations about stars and suns and moons and constellations and all this stuff. And they basically found out that none of the math ever worked. And the reason none of the math worked is because their initial assumption that the earth was the center of the universe was wrong. And with that initial assumption, the way that they thought the world worked was a mess. I think that's the lesson that we have to learn about humility, is that when you think that you are the center of the universe, that you are important, that everything else exists for you, your world's not going to make sense. I think about the way that we talk about other people. I talk about my friends. I talk about my doctor. I talk about, even when I go to Starbucks, that's my barista. She knows how to make my coffee. Everyone that I encounter in my life, I refer to as my blank. That's my boss. You guys are my youth group. That's not the way it works. It's not that everyone in my circle exists for me. It's that we're all existing together. And when I'm the center of all of it, things don't make sense. I try to get perspective a lot of times about like how small I really am. And there's a couple ways that you can get perspective about how small you really are. The first one is to go meet a bear in the wild. And that is not advisable. The second one for me is to read about how big the universe is. And I've got a video that we're going to queue up for you, and I'm going to let you take a look at this.
For us, mostly stuck on our rocky little planet, the view of the universe begins with Earth. This is Earth, silicon and oxygen-based, with a metallic core. The surface is mostly water. It teems with life and rotates once every 24 hours while orbiting a star called the Sun every 365 days. This is the Sun, mostly hydrogen and helium. Its surface temperature is nearly 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit. For energy, our Sun converts 700 million tons of hydrogen into 695 million tons of helium every second. The Sun is part of a solar system formed around 4.5 billion years ago that includes Earth and 7 other orbiting planets from Mercury to Neptune. And it isn't a stationary system. Our solar system is spinning. flying through space at 134 miles per second, turning in circles as part of a vast collection of stars and star systems. There may be 200 billion stars in this collection called the Milky Way galaxy. An estimated 6 billion of those stars with planetary systems like ours. Our solar system orbits the center of the Milky Way on one of its outer arms. The Milky Way is one of more than 125 billion galaxies that make up the visible universe. This is the universe. It's really, really big.
It means I'm about that big. I mean, really, I'm about this big. The story of the Bible I'm going to share with you real quick. These are from the Old Testament. The first one comes from the first one comes from 2 Chronicles 26. There was this king named Uzziah. 2 Chronicles 26, verse 16, it says, after Uzziah became powerful, he became prideful. His pride led to his downfall. Or because he thought he was the most important thing in the world, his world didn't make sense, and so it started to get a little worse. Azariah, another priest, came in and confronted him. They said, it's not right for you to be so cocky, to think that you're so good, so strong. And then God gave him leprosy. Now, this isn't because God's mean. God's not being a jerk. It's just that Uzziah, as the king, as the guy who is in charge of other people, if he has a warped view of his world and thinks that he is the center, the best thing of his world, then everyone around him is going to have this warped view too. And God doesn't want that. So God has to teach this guy humility. God has to remind this king that you are not me. You are not God. You're a king, but you are not God. And so the king gets leprosy, which is this disease. And his skin starts falling off. It's gross. They say, you could still be the king, but we're going to kick you out of the palace. We don't want you to infect everyone. And they put him alone in this little shed thing. And he learned humility the hard way. Today when you go to your groups, you're going to talk about humility a little bit, what it means to be humble, what it means to not think that you're the most important thing in the world. But the lesson that I would have for you is this. There are two ways to get humble. The first one is to spend some time in prayer, spend some time looking at your life and figure out where you're not humble. And the second way is to ignore it and wait for God to make you walk back to your cabin where all your friends are with a pee stain running down your jeans.